Hello, it's John Miles here, and I'm going to show how to set up the cameras and lens for the Iris camera. Now, some people may already have a Nikon 105mm lens, or the Z7, or a Z6, or a Z5, or a Z50, but I'm going to show how I start from scratch, and anybody can get these three parts off the shelf. That's the new Z mount 105 and one of the Z cameras. These are full frame, and the Illuminator uses the SB300. So I'm going to show how I put this together. And the main thing is that when you have a mirrorless camera, it's always open and looking out through the front of the camera. There's no protection from the sensor, and so even when there is a lens mounted, you have to keep a lens cap on it as much as possible. But the most important thing is not to let this be open for very long, like just a couple seconds at a time. And so there's a few excellent ways of minimizing the possibility of dust getting into the camera and landing on the sensor. And I will show some of the best practices for changing lens or installing a lens. And what I like to do is have a clean surface here that's been surface cleaned, and then I get some plain ordinary photocopy paper. I'll get a stack, not the top one, but because it might have dust, but these would be clean and dust free, and they just are fresh off of a stack of photocopy paper. And that is a good place to set the things that we're working with. And so the first step is to have the camera ready and the lens ready. And in this case, I like putting in a 35 or 36mm extension tube to bring the magnification up from 1 to 1 to 1.1 to 1.7. That way the iris fills the frame and you don't waste a lot of megapixels. So the first step here is to prepare the camera. Now, when working with it, it should, of course, always be off. And this is brand new out of the box, so I will remove the protective film here and start here from scratch, basically. And I have a fully charged battery. This is a ENEL15B that comes with it. And with the Z7, it doesn't take the SD type of card, unlike the version 2. It takes both SD and Compact Flash Express B, but this only takes Compact Flash Express B. So these are like $100 cards, and the card readers are $50 or so. But you open this like so, and it's more durable and much faster. It's like 1750 megabits per second instead of 120, which is about what the maximum SDXC can do. So the first step is actually the best way to start is to put this battery in, and the terminals go in first, of course, and the round part goes towards the handle, and that goes in until the orange tab clicks down, and then that shuts. And for installing the card, this gets pushed out, and there's a slot. And these are the cards. It's a Lexar 64. And so that would just go in. That's one of those push to click, and then it's in there. Now again, this has never been powered up. So the next step now in the lens here is I've already put in a filter. I'm using either a UV or a Nikon clear filter. And when you're changing or mounting the lens, it's best to keep the lens cap on at all times because you don't need it. But I'm putting it on these clean pieces of paper that don't have any dust. And my first step will be to mount this, and I'm going to do these two together again to minimize how much time this is open to the air. So I'm going to push this, rotate it clockwise, just a small amount of turn, and then bring in this. Now with these segments, lenses, the camera bodies, and the extension tubes, you always want to line up the two dots that are closest to the connection surface. They might be different colors. Sometimes they're printed inside here, but that's where you start. And generally the contacts will be at the top at the 12 o'clock position of the lens. And you also don't want to have too much time with these open for the same reason, but it's far less critical than the camera body itself. And so having added that extension tube, now I'm just going to rest this here without turning it. And then I get this one, and what I'll do is notice the white dot here. It's right around 1:30 or so o'clock, and we're going to start there and move it up to the 12 o'clock position, and that's the dot that corresponds to that. And so when the cap is off, not only do you want to keep it down to 1 or 2 seconds, but you want the camera to be facing down so that we're in a shower of dust usually, but nothing will fall in, and if there is anything in there, it'll fall out. And now I'm going to remove this and set it down. Then I remove this, and now with a larger, heavier lens, it's not a bad idea to just keep the lens upside down like that, and you can see how that dot lines up by lifting it up a little ways and then rotating that until the 12 o'clock position. And there was just 1 or 2 seconds with that open to the air. And that is how you change the lens. Now, while I'm on that subject, we can see how if you wanted to use a general purpose lens like this 24 to 50 lens, then I'll show how that works. And again, there's some videos on YouTube that show how to do this outdoors, but you should always do it indoors and in a clean environment and with never used. I like to use a few sheets of copy paper. It might not be that obvious, but that will be extra clean and lint free and all. And then again, with a big heavy lens like this macro, I would start with it in that position and get the destination ready here. And I would normally just release that to the point where it just is gently resting on there. Then usually the best way is to where you look at this and you see and you push this and you start this just a little bit, but then once you get it started, you go there until it stops. Then you lift it up, remove this, and remember the contacts are generally ending up at the 12 o'clock point. You can do that alignment and click it into place. And put this one here. And now the camera that is normally used for the iris photography using the macro lens could now be used for general photography. Alright, and then likewise reversing the steps. So now you get to see it again. And what I'm going to do in this case is I'm going to release this just a little bit and set it down. Release this. Finish releasing this. Lift it. Lift that up. And you know that contacts are going to end up at the 12 o'clock, so but it's a good idea to get a visual confirmation of the alignment, and then that's clicked into place. Now if you just do it that way only in an indoors clean room, you've never before used photocopy sheets on the previously cleaned with Windex, say surface cleaner, and in a quiet, calm place, no cats or any animals around, then it won't be a problem to change the lens with the mirrorless. And as I mentioned, not only is it only staring out through the lens, even when it's off, what that means is that you don't want to leave this off when you're not using the camera. It's really extra important to keep the lens cap in place with the mirrorless, so that, you know, so it never gets any light. And then these can be put back. And that's how the camera is prepared. As I mentioned, I did put a filter on the front, and I used a similar method there. Now, there's the last component is this SB300 flash, and there's nothing really to set up here. However, what I was going to show is how you can get a battery eliminator, so you don't have to keep changing these AAA batteries, but that would of course go right onto here. And there's also a battery eliminator for the camera as well. And after this is set up, then this can get slid over to the lock position, and that drives a pin down, keeps it in place, and then this is the power. You slide that down, it goes up to the on. And that's actually ready to mount on the Iris Illuminator, and so that would be the next step. I think I'll show the battery eliminators separately, but this is how you generally remove and attach lenses and the electronic flash to the mirrorless, or it pertains to any type of DSLR as well. But the method is especially important to follow for the mirrorless due to the fact that there's nothing protecting the sensor from dust. And that is... Next, I will show how to configure the Nikon Z7 for iris photography, and this step procedure can be pretty much the same for the Z5 or the Z6, and mostly the same for the Z50. But this is the 45 megapixel Z7, and I've attached the Nikon Macro 105 Z mount here, and it's a nice lens, kind of heavy and big, but it's good because you need a large diameter to get all the light you can. So the first step is the lens would always go to manual here, and for iris photography currently with the current when you're using a chin rest. And the second thing, this is a brand new camera, so I'm going to power it on right now first. And the lens cap is still on, but I'm going to go into the menu system. And usually they ask for what language first, and of course I'm taking the English language on there. And the other thing was that the memory card I put in there is empty except for one file, which is the let me get this in the field of view here. The one file that is on the memory card is a firmware update, and it's to version 3.4. And so, having confirmed the language, I'm going to go to the firmware update, which is the last item in the menu, and I'll apply that update first. And that will be right down right here. Here it says 3.31 and I have 3.4, so all I have to do is go down to update. You can download the current version off the Nikon website, and it's a file that ends in .bin, but you download a exe that extracts a folder with the bin, and you just put that single folder like CFU Z7 0340.bin, and it'll change this from 3.3 to 3.4. So I'm going to hit update. As long as it's there, it will. Here it tells you what you're about to do, a change from the 3.31 to the 3.4, which is the file I downloaded from the Nikon website, and I have I copied it to this memory card that's in here. It's the only file on there. As I say, this is a brand new camera that's never been used, so I know it's ambiguous which one is highlighted, but I guess the black one is yes, so I'm going to hit do over, update. There we go. You get it so the OK is on the answer that you want. That looks like a orange. So now I hit it. And then you just let that update. It doesn't really take that long, but I can set it down here for now. Alright, so now it is done. It says update completed, turn camera off. So I'll roll that inboard, turn it off. Now I'm turning it back on. And while I'm here, I'll go back to, let me set this down here for a minute. Alright, yeah, so I have using a Canon M50 here to record this. So now I'm going to set up the camera from the menu system so you can see how to configure the Z7 for use with the Iris Illuminator and in general for Iris photography. And what I've just done is updated the firmware. Now you can see it says 3.4. Now that I've done that, I can delete the firmware update file from the firmware was for the camera body. And so I'll say yes here. There's also firmware for the lenses, believe it or not. I think that's LF is lens firmware. And this lens boots up, and in fact I'll show you what happens when you turn on the lens, turn on the camera to power on the lens. The display will come up and show you where it's at, like it's on infinity. And when you turn this, it's actually a LCD display that's pretending to return. And you can display the aperture by hitting this again. Magnification is 1:1 there. Auto 0.29 is what we want there. 290 millimeters, and that's the distance from this index mark here. That's the film or the sensor plane. 290 millimeters forward. However, I've added a 36 millimeter extension, so it's a little bit more than that. Anyway, that's what happens here. This is on M, and when the lens powers up, normally it goes to infinity, but there's a setting in the camera that can tell it to automatically go to the closest focus every time you power up, and we'll get to that. So I've deleted the file, I'm done with the firmware update, and actually it's a brand new, I might as well format it while I'm at it, so I'm going to say yeah, just format it. And it's good to start the card before you use it for pictures by formatting it in the camera that you're going to use it for. And there's settings and such. Time zone, I think this also needs setting because I just got it out of the box, so I'm going to go over to my time zone here. And then for the date format, I like having the year, month, day. like an odometer, daylight's off, and then for the date and time, I'm going to go up to today, which is the 18th. I can get that more easy and just see. And the time is, let's see, 15:18. Alright. So now what I'm going to do is see what else. Okay, so we're on the setup menu here. That's the things that you don't change that often. Go in the setup menu. And I would say save focus position. That's an important one. Oops. It is a touch sensitive. You always want it to be on. I'm using the right arrow to go in and then say OK on. And what that does is that when you turn it on now, it'll roll back to where it started. And I'll show that in a minute. The cleaning of the image sensor, we want that to be cleaning every time you shut it down. So yeah, clean it shut. Okay, this video will resume the setup of the Nikon Z7 with the 105 macro lens, and before the battery in the recording video camera ran out, because it was a Canon M50. Now I'm using a Z50 to record this, so it'll be interesting to compare. So anyway, now is in the previous part I mentioned how you can save the focus position. So when I power up, you can see the lens coming into the right focus, which is wherever it was when I powered off. So watch. So I turn on it, the lens is booting up and it rolls over to 290 millimeters, the closest focus for one-to-one imaging. And again, I've used a 36 millimeter tube here, 35 or 36 is about right, for a 1.7 magnification. So getting back to the menu system, there's a few other settings to consider. Most of these other ones are not too important, and let me make sure that's visible here. Like I haven't done there's no need to modify most of these beyond the factory setting, but I am going to start with the top and we'll go through it. So I leave these all on, but I like imagery view. I like to see the picture right after I take it, although when you're using software it may behave differently. These I never remove it from the chip. Alright, because I always do tethered shooting. So here's the first shooting menu, and first thing I like to do in file naming is OK input. Oh, the magnifying glass to confirm it. Okay, so E, Y, E. And then you hit the magnifying plus to confirm it. Now it's going to use that instead of DSC, which is digital still camera. And everything else I use default. Now this I do turn off the ISO. Set it to 100 for iris photography because we want the most detail possible. And that's right. Everything else, there's photo shooting menu. Now, I usually run it in the A mode, so it's a good idea to keep it in the A mode, which is aperture priority, when you're configuring the camera. So we'll do that. And I'll try to hold this in the right angle. These I leave them to their default. Let me go back here. Flash mode, flash compensation. Sometimes I boost that to +1. And Alright, those are all done. Skip the movies. Then I go here. Now there's a couple of settings here that are kind of important. One is, I'll just go down here. This built-in, you don't want that for iris photography. And I like to change all these delays to a minute. There, now they're all a minute. I think I'm done there, right? Timers. Now, file number sequence should always be on and should never be reset. Otherwise, you'll have duplicate file numbers. And framing grid display is great to have, so I'm leaving that on. And peaking highlights, you want that to be on high sensitivity. That'll show you which areas are in perfect focus. Alright, and those are two key settings. The other ones, a modeling flash, don't really want that. And that's basically it. These are configuration options. And over here, I think we started off in that menu, so that's all done. Now it's ready for iPhotography. So that is good to go.